Why knowledge matters.
I like to say understanding must be earned. It must be earned in the mind of the student. I don't believe a teacher can just give a student a big idea that they'll fully and completely understand just by telling them. Here's an example: correlation does not ensure causality. You can say that to a student, you can have them write it down. That's a big abstract idea that they're not going to immediately comprehend. So, understanding must be earned, which means the teacher needs to, in this example, for instance, give kids examples of relationships and have them think about this question. In these relationships, does A cause B, or are they simply just connected somehow, but not in a causal way? And you might give them a variety of examples and non examples and have them talk about it and ask them to explain why they think A caused B or why they may be related but not causal. So over time, they're building their understanding, but they have to do it. And the teacher's role is to facilitate meaning making. That's what we mean by meaning making. You're constructing and building and sharpening and deepening your understanding. Um, so, arguably, this would be a good thing for teaching. Why might some teachers resist or find it difficult? Well, here are a few reasons. Engaging students in meaning making through Socratic questioning, through giving them examples and non examples, for putting them in groups and having them try to work out a reason or an answer, for having them explain their answers, for having them apply their learning to something new. All of that takes time. One of the pressures that teachers from kindergarten to graduate school face is that typically there's too much content to be taught or laid out in standards or in textbooks, and not enough time to teach it all well. And so there's an enormous pressure, especially in public schools, to cover all the standards or to cover all this important content. But if there's too much content and not enough time, what does a teacher do? Well, you can talk faster in class and you can cover more content, but that's not likely to result in engaged learning that lasts. That's at best superficial learning, and the kids just get overwhelmed. So we have to bite the bullet around the question, what's most worth learning? And not all content is of equal value. There's too much to cover anyway. And by the way, the word cover itself should be revealed or revealing. What does it mean to cover something in a colloquial sense? Well, a bedspread or a tablecloth covers up. It's superficial, it's on the surface. And the more worrisome meaning of cover is to cover up, as in to conceal or obscure. Grant Wiggins and I have always said our job is not to cover lots of content superficially, it's to uncover the big ideas and the key processes of the disciplines. Take off the veil and go underneath the surface. And to do that means to engage students in active meaning making. But to summarize this challenge, if there's too much content and not enough time to cover it all, and you think your job is to cover it, you're not going to have time to engage students in what it takes for them to make meaning and to earn their understanding. That's a very real challenge. And that's why you can't talk about teaching for deeper learning before first confronting what are our learning goals, which are most important. Do we really believe that understanding and transfer should be our North Star, not superficial coverage? And then that opens the door to teaching using the methods in the book. The second big challenge that many teachers face, especially again in public schools, are the pressures of standardized tests. Standardized accountability tests can have a gripping effect on many teachers, especially in those in the tested grade areas, because the test results are high stakes. They're published in the papers. Schools are rated accordingly. Real estate values are influenced by how well schools score on tests, and teachers are pressured to get the scores up. Since, however, most standardized tests, at least in the US, are based on selected response test items, multiple choice, there's a, I think, misconception, but understandable belief that if standardized tests are important, if this is how schools and teachers are measured, we got to get the scores up. So that means we have to do a lot of practice testing using multiple choice tests. But multiple choice tests and test items are well suited for assessing student knowledge of basic information. You know it or you don't. You can test that very easily. And they can also be used to test very basic skills. And those are needed, they're foundational. But multiple choice tests are not appropriate measures of things we value most. Do you really understand and can you explain it in your own words? Can you solve a messy problem that involves multiple steps and reasoning? And can you explain your reasoning? Can you write to formulate and support an argument? Can you communicate orally? Can you work well with teams? Can you use design thinking to create a new product? All of these valued outcomes are not susceptible to multiple choice test items. They don't assess those well. However, because the standardized tests are multiple choice in nature, they tend to influence teacher developed and school developed tests, often mimicking the form of the standardized test, sometimes with the belief that, well, if the standardized tests use multiple choice, that's all that we should use because that's how we're being judged. My contention is that's a misunderstanding. And I won't, unless you want, I won't go into all the details on why I made that statement, but I will say standardized tests are hugely influential in many schools and for many teachers. And if you're only mimicking this form of state or standardized tests, you're not answering my second question posed earlier. How do we know students really understand and can apply their learning? So that's another barrier to teaching for deeper learning. Teachers may say, with all good intentions, I'd like to do more of this kind of teaching, but I can't because we have standardized tests and all they're measuring are low-level items often, or that's the perception. The third factor, I'll try to keep this brief, is that when you're engaging students in meaning making as a teacher, you're turning over the learning more to the students. You and your listeners and viewers may have heard the long-standing phrase, the distinction between the teacher as sage on the stage, presenting content, material, new information to students, and the guide on the side. Well, I don't think it's either or. There's clearly a place for direct instruction, modeling, teacher is expert. But if we want to engage students in meaning making, we got to get off the stage and turn into the facilitator of learning, the guide on the side, by posing questions and letting the kids talk, by putting kids in group and letting them debate, by giving them messy problems and letting them try to navigate through, with the teacher providing tips as appropriate. But many teachers, some teachers, I should say, are uncomfortable in that role. They're comfortable being the sage on the stage, being in charge. They're uncomfortable giving over that opportunity to students. In some cases, the students are not equipped for it because many cases, as you go up the grades, kids get into the mindset that their job is to sit back. They're going to be told what to do every step of the way. The teacher's going to be the presenter. Their job is to listen or avert their eyes if a question is asked. And so in some cases, you're changing that mindset. You're saying to the student, no, your job is to be active. Your job is to talk and ask questions. And some kids are uncomfortable with that. Finally, there's a control issue. When you put kids in groups and let them talk, they may not always be on task. And so for understandable reasons, these are the barriers that may prevent more use of the methods described in our book. So again, not to belabor all the bad things, the good things in my experience are once you engage students in more active meaning making, putting them more in control, or at least giving them more opportunities to be active in their learning, often behavior problems drop because the kids aren't bored, the kids aren't distracted, they're engaged.
That's why knowledge matters. Make your life a masterpiece. Visit now programs.whyKnowledgeMatters.com. d-ykm.com.